In Accra, Ghana, the night sky was glowing softly, and the streetlights painted everything in a warm golden shade. Efua stood with Kojo, her heart racing as he held her hand. The whole neighborhood had gathered around, curious and excited. Suddenly, Kojo dropped to one knee, his eyes fixed on her. With a smile that melted her fears, he pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside was a shining golden ring. Efua gasped as he slid it gently onto her finger and whispered, "It's pure gold, just like my love for you." For a moment time stopped. Her family clapped and cheered, neighbors shouted with joy, and the air filled with laughter and music. Efua felt tears rising in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming happiness that this man, her man, was promising her forever. She looked at the ring sparkling under the lights and believed it was the symbol of true love, a love strong and pure. Kojo stood, pulling her into his arms, and the crowd cheered even louder. Efua's mother wiped away tears of pride, and little children danced around them, singing songs of love. That night, Efua's heart was full, her dreams shining as brightly as the ring on her finger. In that moment, she was certain she had found not just a fiancé, but a soulmate. She didn't know then that the sparkle on her finger carried a secret that would change everything. A few days after the proposal, life felt like a dream for Efua. She couldn't stop looking at her finger, smiling every time the ring caught the light. Every sparkle reminded her of Kojo's words. "It's pure gold, just like my love for you." She carried that memory like a song in her heart. But one afternoon, while sitting under a mango tree with her best friend Ajoa, the first crack appeared in that perfect dream. Ajoa leaned closer, her voice low but firm. "Efua, are you sure about Kojo? I've heard things. People say he's not always honest." Efua's smile faded. She looked at her friend, almost offended. "Not honest? Ajoa, he gave me gold, he gave me love. How can that be fake?" Her voice trembled a little, but she forced herself to laugh it off. She didn't want doubts on a day that still felt magical. Ajoa sighed, watching her carefully. "I'm only telling you because I care. People talk, Efua. They say Kojo has fooled others before. I don't want you to get hurt." But Efua shook her head quickly, refusing to let those words sink in. "No. Kojo is different with me. I know him, feel his love. I can't believe he would trick me." She wanted to sound strong, but inside something tiny stirred, a whisper she couldn't silence. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ring, Ajoa's words returned. Her finger felt heavier than usual, the ring pressing down as if carrying secrets. "He gave me gold," she whispered to herself, repeating it like a prayer, hoping it would erase her unease. But her heart didn't feel as light as before. For the first time, she noticed how quickly Kojo had spoken his promises, how easily he had smiled when others praised him. The next morning, Efua wore her ring proudly in front of her family, laughing and showing it off as if Ajoa's warning had never happened. But deep down, the seed of doubt was growing roots. Every time Kojo called her "my queen," she wondered if those words were just as shiny and fragile as the ring itself. She wanted to trust him completely, but Ajoa's voice echoed in her ears. "Are you sure?" Efua tried to silence that voice by holding on tighter to Kojo's image, the charming man who knelt under the stars, who promised her forever. Yet no matter how hard she tried, the doubt refused to leave. It hid behind her smiles, lingered in her silence, and pressed against her chest whenever she touched the ring. Efua didn't want to admit it, but deep in her soul she already knew. Sometimes even the brightest gold can hide the darkest lies. And though she tried to ignore it, the whispers of doubt had already begun their quiet work inside her heart. Weeks went by, and Efua's life seemed perfect on the outside. She wore her ring proudly wherever she went. At church, at the market, even at the women's cooperative where she worked, everyone noticed it. People said, "Efua, you are blessed. Kojo really loves you." Each compliment made her heart swell with pride. She smiled, nodded, and let herself believe that her love story was as pure as the gold she wore. But then one morning she noticed something strange. The skin under the ring looked darker, a faint green line circling her finger. First she laughed it off. "Maybe my skin is sensitive," she told herself. She washed her hands, rubbed the spot, and slipped the ring back on quickly, not wanting to think too much about it. Love, she thought, was stronger than a silly stain. As days passed, the mark grew darker. Each time she removed the ring, the green line remained, almost mocking her. At night, when everyone else was asleep, Efua would hold her hand up to the light and stare at it. The mark seemed to whisper something her heart didn't want to hear. She pressed her palm against her chest, trying to silence the unease rising inside. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself. "It's just my skin. The gold is real. The love is real." But even as she spoke those words, her chest felt hollow. The same ring that once filled her with pride now carried a strange weight. When Kojo visited, flashing his charming smile and sweet words, she hid her hand behind her back, afraid he might see her doubt. She didn't want him to know she was questioning anything. She wanted the dream to last. Still, in quiet moments, the truth pushed harder. One evening, while cooking with her mother, the ring slipped off slightly, and her mother's eyes caught the green stain. "Efua, why does your finger look like that?" she asked gently. Efua quickly pulled her hand away, laughing nervously. "It's nothing, Mama. Just, maybe I wore it too tight." Her mother didn't push further, but her worried glance stayed in Efua's mind. Alone in her room later, Efua sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hand again. The mark felt heavier than the ring itself. It wasn't just her skin changing, it was her soul, quietly telling her that something was wrong. But she didn't want to believe it. She clutched the ring tightly, whispering Kojo's words again. "It's pure gold, just like my love for you." Yet deep inside, she felt the ache of a truth she couldn't escape. Gold wasn't supposed to stain. Love wasn't supposed to feel this heavy. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the first sign had already appeared, leaving a scar not just on her finger, but on her heart. The evening in Kumasi was supposed to be special. Efua's relatives had prepared a long dinner table filled with fufu, light soup, and roasted chicken. The air smelled of spices, and laughter echoed across the courtyard as cousins, aunties, and uncles gathered to celebrate her engagement. Efua wore a bright Kent dress, her ring shining on her finger. She felt proud as people admired it, whispering about how lucky she was to have found a man like Kojo. When Kojo arrived, charming as always, he greeted everyone with confidence. He held Efua's hand tightly, showing the ring to those who asked. For a while, everything felt perfect, until one of the elders, a respected uncle with sharp eyes, asked to see the ring closely. "Come, my daughter," he said kindly. Efua smiled and slipped the ring off, handing it to him with pride. The elder turned it in his hand, holding it up against the light. A frown crossed his face. He rubbed it with his thumb, then chuckled softly, shaking his head. Suddenly, his chuckle turned into a loud laugh. "This is not gold," he announced. "It's brass." The words fell like thunder. The table went silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Some cousins covered their mouths, trying to hide their giggles. Others whispered to each other, pointing at the ring. Efua froze, her cheeks burning hot, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to disappear, to run away from the eyes staring at her. Kojo leaned back in his chair, smiling as if nothing serious had happened. "They're just jealous of us," he said smoothly, reaching for her hand. "Don't mind them, my queen." His voice was calm, but Efua could feel her entire world shaking. She forced a weak smile, but inside, her heart cracked. She remembered Ajoa's warning, the green mark on her finger, the unease she had pushed aside. Now, in front of her whole family, the truth was being shouted louder than she could deny. Her mother's face turned pale with worry, and one of her aunts whispered, "How could Kojo do this?" Another uncle shook his head, muttering, "A man who gives fake gold will give fake promises." Every word pierced Efua like a knife. She lowered her eyes, staring at the plate of food she could no longer eat. The laughter around her grew heavier, filling her ears until she wanted to scream. But she stayed silent, her hand trembling under the table. She wanted to believe Kojo's words, that everyone was jealous, but deep down the pain was too real. That night, when the dinner ended, Efua walked home with her head down. The ring still sat on her finger, but now it felt like a chain. The sparkle that once brought her pride now carried shame. For the first time, she realized that the love she had been clinging to might not be as pure as she believed. And though she tried to hold her tears back, they rolled silently down her cheeks, carrying away the last pieces of her blind faith. One hot afternoon in Accra, Efua could no longer silence the storm in her heart. The green stain on her finger, the laughter at the family dinner, the whispers she had ignored for too long, all of it pushed her toward the truth she was afraid to face. With her heart racing, she slipped the ring off her finger and tucked it carefully into her purse. Then, with slow, shaky steps, she made her way to OSU Market, a place known for its jewelers. The market buzzed with life, vendors shouting prices, children weaving through the crowd, the smell of roasted plantain mixing with perfume stalls. But Efua barely noticed any of it. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her palms sweating as she walked toward a small jewelry shop tucked between fabric sellers and shoe stands. A sign above the door read, "Kwaka's Fine Gold." Inside, the air smelled of polished metal and wood. Behind the counter stood an elderly jeweler with kind but sharp eyes. "Welcome, young lady," he said warmly. "How can I help you today?" Efua hesitated, her throat dry. Slowly, she pulled the ring from her purse and placed it on the glass counter. "Please, can you tell me if this is real gold?" Her voice trembled as though each word carried a weight she could no longer bear. The jeweler picked up the ring, holding it close to the light. He turned it in his hands, rubbed it against a small stone, and poured a few drops of liquid to test its metal. The silence stretched, every second hitting Efua's chest like a drum. She bit her lip, her hands gripping the counter tightly. Finally, the jeweler sighed and looked at her with gentle eyes. "My daughter, sorry, this ring is not gold. It's cheap brass, maybe plated at one time, but not real." The words sliced through her heart. Efua's knees weakened, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The jeweler nodded firmly. "It has no value. I wouldn't even buy it for scrap." Tears filled her eyes instantly. She tried to blink them away, but they rolled down her cheeks. She wasn't just crying for the ring. She was crying for every promise Kojo had made, every word she had believed, every dream she had built on a lie. The sparkle she had once shown off so proudly was nothing but a trick. She picked up the ring with shaking hands, staring at it as though it were a stranger. In that small shop, she felt the weight of betrayal press down on her chest. Her love had been fake, her trust had been broken, and no matter how much she wanted to deny it, she couldn't escape the truth anymore. As she stepped back into the busy market, the world seemed louder, harsher. The laughter of children, the chatter of sellers, all of it blurred into noise. Efua walked away trembling, her tears falling freely onto the dusty streets of Accra. She clutched the worthless ring in her fist, not realizing it wasn't just metal she was holding, it was the shattered pieces of her trust. That evening, Efua could no longer carry the weight inside her chest. The jeweler's words haunted her every breath, and the green mark on her finger now felt like a wound that would never heal. She held the ring in her hand, her palm sweaty, her heart pounding like a drum. For days she had replayed every moment with Kojo, his promises, his charm, his smile under the streetlights, and now she knew it was all built on a lie. She decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. That night, she asked Kojo to meet her near the small cafe where they often sat together. When he arrived, his usual grin spread across his face, as if nothing was wrong. "My queen," he said, reaching for her hand. But Efua pulled back, her eyes filled with hurt. "Kojo," she whispered, her voice shaking, "why did you lie to me?" She opened her hand and showed him the ring. "I went to a jeweler. This isn't gold. It's worthless. You promised me it was pure like your love. Why would you do this to me?" For a moment, Kojo looked surprised, but then his expression hardened. He crossed his arms and gave a careless shrug. "So what? What matters is that you believed it was real. Isn't that enough?" The words stabbed her deeper than any knife. Efua's lips parted, but no words came. She had expected anger, maybe even an apology, but not this coldness, not this cruelty. Her eyes filled with tears as she stared at the man she once thought was her soulmate. "Enough!" she finally said, her voice trembling. Kojo, love is not a trick. Love is not pretending. I trusted you with my heart, and you gave me nothing but lies. Kojo smirked, trying to brush it off. You're being dramatic, Efua. People wear fake things all the time. It doesn't change how I feel about you. But to Efua it changed everything. In that moment she saw him clearly. His charm was just a mask, his words nothing but empty air. The man who had once made her heart flutter was now the same man who thought deception was enough to build love. She shook her head slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks. No, Kojo. I wasn't just wearing a fake ring. I was living in a fake love. Her voice cracked, but there was strength in it too. Kojo tried to reach for her again, but this time she stepped back. The distance between them felt heavy, final. She slipped the ring off her finger and placed it gently in his hand. Keep it, she whispered. I don't want to carry lies anymore. With that she turned away, her heart shattered but her spirit awakening. Kojo stood there, speechless, as she walked into the night. And though Efua's tears burned her cheeks, deep inside, she knew she had taken the first step toward freeing herself from the prison of false love. After that painful night, Efua felt like her world had collapsed, but she also knew she couldn't go back. The man she once called her love had shown her the truth, and no matter how much it hurt, she refused to live in lies any longer. At first, the silence felt heavy. Her phone would ring late at night, Kojo's name flashing on the screen, but she let it ring until it stopped. His messages came, full of excuses and sweet words, but she didn't reply. Every time she ignored him, her heart ached, but she told herself, this pain will pass. Fake love must end. Slowly the distance between them grew. She stopped waiting for his promises, stopped dressing up in hopes of seeing him, stopped replaying his words in her head. Instead, Efua began pouring all her energy into the women's cooperative where she worked. It was a small group of women making handmade products, cloths, baskets, and jewelry, but for Efua, it became a place of healing. She arrived early each morning, helping organize supplies, learning how to manage accounts, and sitting with the older women to listen to their wisdom. Money is like soil, one of them told her. If you plant wisely, it will grow. Efua wrote those words down in a small notebook and carried them in her heart. She started saving every little bit she earned, putting coins aside, watching her small savings grow like seeds in the ground. As days turned into weeks, she noticed something else changing. The green mark on her finger, once so dark and painful, began to fade. She would look at her hand and touch the spot, remembering everything it had taught her. The stain was disappearing, but the lesson remained clear. Fake gold leaves marks and fake love leaves scars. Her family noticed the change too. She laughed more freely, her shoulders lighter without the weight of pretending. Neighbors who once whispered about her humiliation now admired her strength. Ajoa, her best friend, held her hand one evening and said, Efua, I'm proud of you. You could have broken down, but instead you're building yourself up. Efua smiled, tears shining in her eyes. She knew she wasn't healed completely. Her heart still carried the ache of betrayal, but she also knew she was becoming stronger every single day. Instead of waiting for love to define her worth, she was learning to define it herself. She worked late nights sketching ideas for jewelry designs, simple pieces that told stories of truth and strength. In her sketches, she imagined women wearing them proudly, never doubting what was on their fingers the way she once had. By the time the stain on her finger had fully vanished, Efua had transformed in silence. She was no longer the girl who believed in sweet words and empty promises. She was now a woman shaping her own future, carrying scars that reminded her never to settle for anything less than real. Months passed, and Efua's life began to look very different from the girl who once cried over a fake ring. She had worked day and night at the women's cooperative, saving money and learning everything she could about business. The pain in her heart had slowly turned into fuel. She told herself, if fake gold broke me, then real gold will rebuild me. With that dream she started something new, her own jewelry line. First it was small. She set up a wooden table at the edge of OSU Market, laying out a few handmade pieces, rings, necklaces, and bracelets. Each piece carried a name, a story, a message of truth. On a sign above her table she wrote, Real gold, real stories. Women passing by stopped to look, touched by the message as much as the shine. One woman bought a ring and said softly, "This feels different. It feels honest." Word began to spread. Soon more and more women came, not just for the jewelry, but for the meaning behind it. Efua shared her story quietly with them, telling how she once wore a ring that left a green stain on her finger, and how she had promised herself never to wear lies again. Her honesty made her brand more powerful than any advertisement could. Her small table grew into a stall, her stall into a shop. Within months, her jewelry became known across Accra and beyond. Newspapers wrote about her as the young woman who turned heartbreak into gold. Customers traveled from other towns to buy pieces from her collection, saying they wore them not only for beauty but as a reminder of strength and truth. The same people who once laughed at her in Kumasi now spoke her name with admiration. Even her own relatives, who had once shaken their heads in pity, now held their heads high, proud of what she had built. Her best friend Ajoa hugged her tightly one evening and said, "You turned pain into power, Efua. You've shown us all what real strength looks like." With each success, Efua's confidence bloomed. She stood taller, smiled brighter, and walked with a grace that came from knowing her worth. She no longer needed Kojo's sweet words or anyone else's approval. She had built something real with her own hands. One day, as she opened her boutique, she looked down at her finger, the place where the green stain once lived. The skin was clear now, smooth and unmarked, but she still carried the memory of that scar deep inside. And instead of sadness, she felt grateful. Without that stain, she might never have discovered her strength. Efua had risen, not just as a businesswoman, but as a symbol for women everywhere. Her jewelry shone with gold, but her story shone brighter. She was living proof that even the deepest betrayal can be turned into something beautiful, something unbreakable, something real. The evening air in Accra was calm when Efua locked the doors of her boutique, her shop glowing warmly from the inside. Shelves sparkled with jewelry pieces, each one carrying not only gold but also her story of truth and resilience. Customers had just left, praising her work and promising to return. Efua stood for a moment, breathing deeply, proud of how far she had come. She was no longer the broken girl who once cried over lies. She was a woman who had risen above them. As she turned to leave, a shadow appeared at the entrance. Her heart skipped for a second when she saw him. Kojo, the same man who once slipped a fake ring on her finger, now stood outside her shop, his clothes wrinkled, his face tired, his charm completely gone. His eyes carried desperation instead of pride. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with memories of love, betrayal, and pain. "Efua," Kojo finally said, his voice rough. I need to talk to you." She didn't answer. She simply unlocked the door again and let him step inside. His eyes wandered across the room, widening as he saw the gold jewelry glimmering under the lights. Pieces more beautiful than anything he had ever given her. For the first time, he looked small in her presence, humbled by what she had built. "I've lost everything," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Business failed, friends left, have nothing. But you, look at you. You've become everything." He took a step closer, his hands shaking. "Efua, give me another chance. Please. We can start again. This time, I'll be real with you." Efua looked at him, her face calm, her eyes steady. She remembered the night under the stars when he promised her pure gold. She remembered the green stain on her finger, the humiliation at the family dinner, the cruel words when she confronted him. Every moment of pain flashed before her, but so did every step of her rise. The women's cooperative, the long nights of hard work, the day she opened her first shop. She realized she didn't need his apology, and she didn't need his love. Kojo's eyes pleaded with her, but Efua remained silent. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stood tall, her silence louder than anything she could have said. Finally, she walked to the counter, picked up one of her rings, and placed it carefully back into its display box. Then she turned to him with a calm expression. Her silence told him everything, that his chance was gone, that she had moved beyond him, that he no longer had power over her heart. Kojo lowered his head, ashamed. He walked out of the boutique slowly, his footsteps heavy with regret. Efua locked the door behind him and stood in the glow of her shop, her heart steady. For the first time she felt completely free. The tables had turned, and this time she was the one holding the power, not in revenge but in strength. The night of the grand opening in Accra felt magical. Efua's flagship store shone like a jewel, its glass doors reflecting the city lights. Inside, rows of golden pieces sparkled under chandeliers, each one carrying her story of strength and truth. Guests filled the hall, family, friends, customers, and even strangers who had followed her journey. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and her name echoed with admiration. When it was time, Efua stepped onto the stage in a flowing Kent gown, her head held high. She looked out at the crowd, her heart swelling with emotion. For a moment, she thought of the girl she once was, the girl who cried over a fake ring and broken promises. Now she stood as a woman who had built her own empire, her scars turned into light. She held the microphone and spoke with calm strength. "Gold is not in the shine," she began, her voice steady, "but in the truth it carries. Fake love like fake gold will always leave stains. But real love, like real gold, never fades." Her words echoed through the hall, and silence fell as people absorbed the meaning. Then, applause erupted like thunder, filling the room with cheers and admiration. In the back of the crowd, Kojo stood quietly. His eyes glistened not with pride but with regret. As he watched Efua glowing on stage, he realized the truth. He had lost more than just a woman. He had lost someone who had turned her pain into power, someone who had risen like a queen. Efua smiled, her spirit unshaken. That night was not about her past. It was about her future, shining, unbreakable and real, just like the gold she now carried with pride.